I stood in the center of the magnificent hotel lobby at Miami Beach as Harlan threw my employee ID card directly onto the polished marble floor. My name is Everly, a 24-year-old intern who had spent months enduring the harshest shifts to prove my worth in this industry. Harlan announced my immediate termination without any prior warning, while a group of wealthy guests watched the humiliation unfold with cold indifference. He claimed that my presence at the front desk made the VIP guests of Schuyler feel extremely uncomfortable during their stay. Harlan continued to insult my professional competence by threatening to place my name on a permanent blacklist across the entire hospitality industry in Florida. I maintained a calm demeanor despite his aggressive tone, then slowly pulled out my specialized phone to activate a pre-arranged call. The icy and authoritative voice of Mom echoed through the speakerphone as she commanded Harlan to remain exactly where he was until she arrived. Harlan looked at me with pure disdain before shouting that Schuyler said my face made her irritated, so I should pack my things and leave before security dragged me out. If you want to see how a humiliated intern turns the tables on a billion-dollar empire and exposes the truth that shocks the entire industry, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss the explosive conclusion of this high-stakes family drama. My 6 months of undercover work here was never a game, but rather the final challenge stated in the will of my grandfather, Silas. He insisted that I experience every entry-level position to truly understand the operational flaws within the Everly Marine Group before I could claim my inheritance. I spent my days scrubbing floors and working the front desk, while my family members assumed I was traveling the world on a spending spree. During this time, I discovered that Schuyler possessed absolutely no professional competence, despite being groomed by Vance to eventually take control of the entire company. Vance had been abusing his position as the senior legal advisor to slowly alter the corporate governance structure, while Mom remained occupied with international expansions. He was strategically clearing a path for his biological daughter to seize power by undermining the legacy that Silas had spent 50 years building. My best friend Rowan worked quietly in the accounting department and helped me gather copies of highly unusual transaction receipts that pointed toward systemic fraud. We spent countless nights analyzing these documents in secret to ensure that every piece of evidence was undeniable before presenting it to the board. I quickly realized that the financial reports sent to Mom had been completely distorted by Schuyler and Harlan to hide their massive budget overruns. They were funneling corporate funds into private lifestyle expenses, while claiming the losses were due to market fluctuations and increased operational costs. The isolation and constant harassment I faced from colleagues under the direction of Schuyler gave me a clear understanding of the internal rot within the hotel. I watched as hardworking staff members were threatened with termination if they dared to question the questionable orders issued by Harlan. Schuyler took pleasure in creating a toxic environment where loyalty to her personal whims was valued far more than professional integrity or guest satisfaction. I documented every instance of Vance using legal jargon to intimidate minority shareholders into selling their stakes at undervalued prices to his shell companies. My mother remained blissfully unaware of the betrayal happening right under her nose because she trusted the man she had married 3 years ago. The weight of the evidence against them grew heavier each day as Rowan provided more internal memos confirming their coordinated attempt to hijack the group. Every interaction I had with the staff reinforced the necessity of Silas's final wish because the company was drowning in corruption and greed. I had to endure the daily insults from Harlan while knowing that each piece of data I collected was another nail in the coffin of their ambitious plans. Schuyler's arrogance blinded her to the fact that the intern she despised was actually the person who held her entire future in a digital file. My commitment to the truth was the only thing that kept me going through the exhaustion of working double shifts at the lobby desk. The intricate web of lies spun by Vance was starting to unravel as I connected the dots between his private law firm and the hotel's disappearing assets. I saw how he manipulated legal loopholes to bypass the board's oversight while presenting himself as a devoted husband to my mother. Rowan risked his own career to secure the encrypted files that proved Skylar was intentionally sabotaging the performance of the Miami branch. They wanted the hotel to appear failing so they could justify a forced sale to an outside entity controlled by Vance's associates. I felt a deep sense of responsibility to protect the employees who were being exploited by this predatory management style. The corruption was not just about the money, but the destruction of the values that Silas had instilled in every corner of this resort. I stayed focused on the mission despite the emotional toll of seeing my family's heritage being sold off piece by piece for personal gain. The deeper I looked into the records, the more I realized that this was a carefully orchestrated coup that had been years in the making. 10 minutes before everything exploded, Skylar walked toward me with the triumphant expression of someone who was about to inherit a kingdom. She stood in the center of the bustling lobby and loudly called for the hotel security team to forcibly remove me from my station in front of our elite guests. The high-end clientele watched in uncomfortable silence while she threatened to use the extensive influence of Vance to ensure no hotel in the United States would ever hire me again. I did not show a single hint of fear, but instead calmly reminded Skylar about the strict data privacy protocols she had just violated by showing internal guest files to her personal friends. My composed response only seemed to fuel her rage as she pointed a manicured finger at my face, while the security guards hesitated near the entrance. Harlan laughed mockingly from behind the mahogany counter and declared that the rules in this establishment were dictated solely by Skylar and Vance, rather than a lowly intern like myself. He sneered at my attempts to cite company policy because he believed their grip on the Everly Marine Group was now absolute and beyond any legal challenge. I reached for the terminal and sent a heavily encrypted file containing every piece of incriminating evidence directly to the private inbox of the board of directors. A terrifying silence began to fill the grand lobby when I looked directly into Skylar's eyes and informed her that my detailed report had actually been submitted long before this confrontation. The smug grin on her face vanished instantly as I explained that the board members were likely reviewing the evidence of her financial fraud at this very moment. Skylar's voice cracked with desperation when she realized that her public display of power was being recorded by the high-definition security cameras I had personally calibrated. She shouted at the top of her lungs, asking who I thought I was to dare lecture her on management before ordering the guards to throw me out onto the street immediately. The wealthy onlookers whispered among themselves while I stood my ground against the two security men who were clearly reluctant to lay hands on me in such a public setting. I remained focused on the digital timestamp on my watch, while knowing that the invisible countdown for their professional demise had already reached its final seconds. Harlan tried to intervene by grabbing my arm, but I firmly shook him off while reminding him that physical assault would only add to the lengthy list of charges he was facing. The air in the lobby felt heavy with the weight of an impending collapse that neither Vance nor Skylar was prepared to handle. Every person in the room could sense the shift in power as the arrogant confidence of my sister began to crumble under the pressure of my calm accusations. I told her that her tenure as a manager was effectively over because the evidence of her incompetence was now in the hands of people who valued the family legacy more than her greed. The tension reached its peak when the elevator doors behind the reception desk chimed and indicated the arrival of the executive team from the corporate headquarters. Skylar tried to regain her composure by smoothing her expensive dress, but her shaking hands betrayed the absolute terror she was feeling inside. I simply waited for the inevitable arrival of the one person who had the authority to end this chaotic circus once and for all. Exactly 15 minutes later, my call was not a cry for help, but the detonator for a purge plan that had been prepared for many months. The board of directors had already received my detailed reports regarding the financial discrepancies and operational failures within the Miami branch. My final call served only as the ultimate signal to activate an emergency audit and security protocol that had been waiting in the wings. Within seconds, the hotel lobby was completely locked down by internal control teams and independent lawyers appointed directly by Mom. Skylar stood frozen as she watched the professional security detail neutralize her hand-picked guards with quiet and efficient precision. The atmosphere of arrogant chaos was instantly replaced by a cold and clinical authority that neither Vance nor Harlan could hope to challenge. Mom walked through the main entrance with an overwhelming presence that commanded the attention of every single person in the grand lobby. She walked past the reception desk and completely ignored the desperate greetings offered by both Vance and Skylar as she moved toward me. Every camera feed in the lobby was suddenly extracted and projected onto the large digital screens for everyone to witness. The guests watched in silence as the footage of my public humiliation and Skylar's abusive behavior played back in high definition. The truth about my identity was finally announced to the entire room, which caused a visible wave of psychological shock among the hotel staff. Employees who had once ignored or insulted me now looked away in deep shame as they realized I was the primary heir to the Everly legacy. Mom stood beside me and firmly stated that she had been monitoring my investigation since the very first day of my undercover internship. She informed the gathered crowd that today marked the absolute end for the greedy individuals who had attempted to dismantle our family business. I looked at the stunned faces of my enemies and told them that the board had been warned long before this moment arrived. My call was simply intended to accelerate the inevitable consequences that they had brought upon themselves through their own corruption. Skylar tried to stammer an explanation, but the independent legal team began handing out formal suspension notices to everyone involved in the fraud. The independent lawyers started securing all corporate servers to prevent any further destruction of financial evidence by Harlan or his associates. Vance attempted to reach out to Mom, but she maintained a professional distance that signaled the total collapse of his influence within the group. I felt a profound sense of relief, as the heavy burden of secrecy was finally lifted from my shoulders after months of quiet endurance. The lobby was no longer a place of harassment, but a crime scene where the evidence of their betrayal was being systematically collected. Mom confirmed that her initial trust in Vance had been replaced by a strategic resolve to protect the empire Silas had built for our future. The arrogant confidence that Skylar once possessed had completely evaporated as she realized the sheer scale of the legal forces now arrayed against her. We watched as the internal audit team began their work by seizing every ledger and digital record managed by Harlan during his tenure. The transition of power was swift and left no room for the theatrical excuses that Skylar attempted to offer to the board members. It was a moment of absolute clarity where the values of integrity and hard work finally triumphed over the shallow greed of my detractors. 5 minutes later, inside the locked boardroom, the soulless numbers began to speak and expose the crimes of Harlan and Skylar. The financial deficit was not just a few $100,000 in petty cash, but a staggering $3 million that had been systematically split and moved into offshore shell accounts. I stood at the head of the long oak table and presented the undeniable logic of how Harlan used fraudulent booking orders to legitimize the withdrawal of cash from our emergency reserve funds. He created hundreds of ghost reservations for non-existent corporate events to mask the continuous outflow of capital over the past 6 months. Skylar began to panic visibly as she saw her own approval signature on multiple invoices for luxury services that were never actually provided to the hotel. Her hands trembled while the independent audit team displayed digital evidence of her personal spending being billed as necessary operational upgrades. Vance tried to intervene and protect Skylar by blaming the massive discrepancies on a series of unfortunate system errors during the recent software migration. Mom immediately commanded him to remain silent with a single cold and sharp look that effectively ended his attempt to derail the investigation. The experts from the independent audit team confirmed that every piece of evidence I provided was entirely accurate and part of a deeply rooted systemic fraud. They showed how the money was funneled through a complex web of intermediaries before disappearing into accounts that were directly linked to Harlan's relatives. I looked straight at the disgraced manager and asked how $3 million could simply vanish through offshore accounts without the active cooperation of the system administrator. Harlan could not find the words to defend himself, as the technical data proved he had manually overridden the security alerts on several occasions. The board members expressed their absolute disgust as the full scale of the betrayal became clear through the detailed financial spreadsheets. Mom did not hesitate for a single second before executing the order to freeze the personal corporate accounts of both Harlan and Skylar right there at the meeting table. This immediate action ensured that no further assets could be moved, while the legal team prepared the formal criminal complaints for the authorities. We watched the color drain from Skylar's face as she realized that her life of unearned luxury was being dismantled by the very numbers she thought she could manipulate. The air in the boardroom was thick with the weight of the consequences that were now inevitable for everyone involved in this elaborate scheme. Every transaction record told a story of greed that had blinded them to the fact that someone was always watching the ledgers. Harlan's silence was a loud admission of guilt, while the forensic accountants continued to pull more threads from their tangled web of lies. Mom's professional resolve remained unshakable as she took back control of the financial destiny of the Everly Marine Group from those who sought to ruin it. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction knowing that the truth was finally documented in black and white for the entire board to see. The $3 million theft was no longer a secret hidden in the shadows, but a documented crime that would lead them directly to a courtroom. It was the moment where my months of tedious data collection finally paid off in the form of absolute justice for my grandfather's legacy. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the focus of the betrayal shifted entirely toward Vance, who was the man my mother once trusted with her entire life and career. I stood before the board members and published the definitive evidence that Vance had been quietly forging Mom's signature on multiple land transfer contracts in Miami Beach. His ultimate goal was to transform the strategic assets of the Everly Marine Group into the private property of a shadow company he controlled from behind the scenes. The truth about how Vance had been carefully training Skylar to become a puppet for his corporate takeover began to emerge with devastating clarity. He had spent years manipulating her insecurities to ensure she would follow his illegal directives without questioning the long-term consequences for our family legacy. Mom realized with a bitter heart that her entire marriage had been nothing more than a calculated move in Vance's cold-blooded business strategy to dismantle Silas's empire. The shock on her face was quickly replaced by a cold resolve as the corporate attorneys presented the legal documents for an immediate divorce. These papers included a comprehensive revocation of Vance's legal advisory powers to prevent him from causing any further damage to our corporate structure. Skylar collapsed into her chair when she finally realized that she was merely a disposable tool in the hands of her own father. Her arrogance was replaced by a hollow despair because she understood that she was about to lose everything, including her status and her future within the group. I looked directly at the man who had tried to steal our heritage and asked if he had been preparing for this betrayal since the day he married my mother. Vance tried to maintain his composed facade, but the forensic evidence of his forgery was too overwhelming for any legal defense to overcome. I reminded him that while he might have been a clever lawyer, he had forgotten that I was the granddaughter of Silas and carried his blood. The boardroom was silent as the weight of this massive deception settled over the individuals who had once viewed Vance as a loyal partner. Every contract he had touched over the past 3 years was now subject to a criminal investigation by the authorities who were already waiting outside. Mom signed the revocation papers with a steady hand that signaled the absolute end of Vance's influence over our family and our business. The transition of his former responsibilities was handed over to a team of independent trustees who would oversee the recovery of the stolen land titles. Skylar's attempts to plead for mercy were ignored by the board members who were focused on the sheer scale of the financial damage Vance had caused. It was a moment of profound clarity where the masks of professional loyalty were stripped away to reveal the raw greed underneath. Vance's silent fury was a stark contrast to the calm atmosphere that now prevailed as we began the process of cleaning up his mess. The legal team confirmed that every forged document would be challenged in court to ensure the Miami properties were returned to the Everly Marine Group. We watched as Vance was escorted from the boardroom by security, while Mom focused her attention on the monumental task of rebuilding the trust he had shattered. The internal rot that had threatened to destroy us was finally being excised with the precision of a surgical operation. I felt a deep sense of duty fulfilled, as the evidence I gathered over 6 months became the foundation for this necessary purge. The family legacy was no longer at the mercy of a predator who had used love as a weapon for financial gain. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the federal agents who had been secretly building the case file for many months officially made their appearance. These FBI investigators did not arrive by random chance, as they had been collaborating closely with Mom and me since we first detected the initial signs of massive fraud. I stood firmly by the main entrance as the team of agents secured the perimeter to ensure no one could escape before the warrants were served. Vance was intercepted in the center of the hotel lobby and immediately handcuffed in front of everyone for federal financial fraud and forging documents belonging to a billion-dollar corporation. The sight of the once powerful legal advisor being restrained by federal authorities sent a shockwave of silence through the entire building. Skylar was simultaneously escorted out of the executive wing by security personnel while she screamed Vance's name in a desperate attempt to find a protector. Her father remained chillingly silent and refused to look in her direction as he was led toward the waiting black sedans outside. Harlan was apprehended at the exact same moment within his private office, which brought a sudden end to the career of a deceitful sycophant. The high-profile guests and hotel employees witnessed the entire spectacle of these arrogant individuals being taken away in total humiliation. I walked toward Vance and told him that the federal agents had been monitoring this entire operation for several months already. Today was simply the day for the execution of the arrest warrant that he truly deserved for his betrayal of our family trust. Mom stood on the grand staircase and officially announced to the gathered media that she was severing all personal and professional ties with Vance and his daughter. She made it clear that the Everly Marine Group would no longer be associated with anyone involved in the systematic looting of its assets. The federal team began loading boxes of seized digital evidence and physical ledgers into their vehicles to be used in the upcoming criminal trial. I watched as the confidence that Skylar once used to bully the staff completely crumbled under the weight of the silver handcuffs on her wrists. The employees who had been oppressed by Harlan's management style began to whisper among themselves with a mixture of relief and disbelief at the sudden shift in power. Mom's voice remained steady and cold as she directed the remaining managers to cooperate fully with the federal investigation to ensure a thorough cleaning of the company records. The reputation of the hotel was being restored in real time as the public saw that justice was finally being served to those who thought they were above the law. We had spent so many nights preparing the documentation for this moment that the actual arrest felt like the closing of a dark chapter. Vance tried to speak to his lawyer on his cell phone, but an agent promptly confiscated the device and informed him of his rights in a stern tone. The arrogance that had defined their management of the Miami branch was replaced by the cold reality of federal prison sentences and massive legal fees. I felt the tension that had gripped my life for the past 6 months finally dissipate as the vehicles pulled away from the curb. The legacy of Silas was no longer being held hostage by a man who saw our family as nothing more than a financial target. We remained in the lobby for a long time to answer the questions of the local authorities and to provide additional statements regarding the forged land titles. Every person who had participated in the conspiracy was now facing the full power of the federal justice system without any hope of escape. It was a day of reckoning that proved no amount of clever legal maneuvering could hide the truth from those determined to find it. 6 months after the legal storm, the lobby of the Everly Marine Hotel welcomed the morning sunlight of a new era, which was the era of integrity. I stood in my new position as the Chief Strategy Officer while looking at the fresh group of interns with a deep sense of empathy and respect that I once never received myself. The feeling of standing firmly on my own 2 feet and successfully protecting my family legacy brought me a level of happiness that is truly difficult to describe in words. Vance and Skylar are currently facing long-term prison sentences and complete isolation from the American elite society as the most realistic consequence for their unchecked greed. Their names have become a cautionary tale within the corporate world and serve as a reminder that betrayal eventually leads to absolute ruin. The relationship between Mom and me no longer has any barriers or secrets, because we are working together to rebuild the group through total sincerity and mutual trust. We have implemented new transparency protocols that ensure every employee, from the janitors to the executives, feels valued and protected by the company. I realized during this long journey that the true value of an heir does not lie in the amount of money sitting in a bank account. Instead, it resides in the courage to face betrayal head-on and the resilience required to rebuild what others tried to destroy. The legacy of Silas is now stronger than ever because it is built on a foundation of honesty rather than the hollow manipulation practiced by Vance. I want to offer my most sincere thanks to the audience who has accompanied me through the darkest moments of this long and complicated story. Your support provided the strength I needed to keep fighting when the odds seemed stacked against my survival in this corporate jungle. I hope that my personal journey helps you believe in justice and gives you the courage to stand up for what is right in your own life. Never forget that the truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deep someone tries to bury it under a mountain of lies. It has been an honor to share these intimate details of my struggle and my eventual triumph over those who sought to take everything from us. The Everly Marine Group is now a symbol of renewal and a testament to the power of staying true to one's principles in the face of immense pressure. As I look toward the future, I see endless possibilities for growth that are rooted in the lessons we learned during those chaotic months of undercover investigation. Every challenge we faced served only to refine our vision and solidify our commitment to the values that Silas originally established for this empire. My story is proof that you can lose your position, but you should never lose your integrity or your sense of purpose. I hope my story helps you believe in justice and the power of truth. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments section below, because I really want to hear your perspectives on these events. Perhaps after hearing this ending, many of you feel a sense of satisfaction, but please don't stop there. If we look deeper into what Everly went through, you'll see that this story carries a message far more important than just revenge. From my perspective, Everly's journey isn't just a high society comeback. It is a powerful testament to the strength of integrity. Money can buy temporary obedience, but only true character and ethics can help you sustain a lasting legacy. A real leader must understand the values found at the very bottom to have the vision required to lead a billion-dollar empire. If you found yourself in a position of such blatant injustice like Everly, would you have the patience to gather evidence and bide your time, or would you choose a different way to confront it? I truly appreciate those of you who have listened until this very moment. Please leave your thoughts or your own way of handling this in the comments below. I'll be reading and responding to each of your perspectives.